Mr. Chairman, we now move to item number 7 under Public Health. Receive verbal update regarding the Reedley Lab abatement.
Okay, Joe, just for clarification there, for this item, there will be no public comment as this is only an informational item.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, board members. I'm Joe Prado, Assistant Director for Fresno County Department of Public Health. I really appreciate this opportunity to come before you and just give you an update on the Reedley Lab situation. And for us to give you that update, we have to really tell you how the information we're presenting, how it's really representing over 14 federal, state, and local agency response here. The information that I'm going to present to you today is really an accumulation of that, actually going back to information that we've been gathering back to 2018. So we're going to walk through this one by one, each of these slides here. I'd love to have questions and comments as we kind of go through this here. I just want to give special thanks to our Environmental Health Division within the department. They've done an excellent job on really bringing everything to the forefront and really supporting City of Reedley. City of Reedley, today we have Nicole Ziba, City Manager, who's available today. And I just want to really call out City of Reedley here and just the exceptional work they have done from day one in just the significant collaboration and really bringing in the right resources to address this potential public health issue. Right here on the slide, we want to get you acclimated to the location of Universal Meditech site. We're going to start back in 2018. This firm here actually was located at 1320 East Fortune Avenue. So that's between North and Central Avenue there. They did have operations within the City of Fresno jurisdiction. These are some photos taken of that City of Fresno site, 1320 Fortune. As you can see to the far left there, lots of boxes, lots of medical devices there. You see some of the bench work that they were doing with that lab work that they were doing. You see some of the refrigerators and freezers that here, and this here is it's a holding cage for mice there. So this is just a confirmation. When they were in City of Fresno, they did have mice there, and they were doing their operation there as well. These are photos taken by the City of Fresno. Much appreciate City of Fresno's collaboration here has been really great in when they bring us in to really have a good conversation and assessing what's on site. Here is these are the mice bins here as well, and some other areas. These materials here, this has some consumables materials. These materials here are items we found in the Reedley warehouse as well. So at the Reedley lab, you could see we saw some of these same materials in Fresno move its way over to City of Reedley. Okay, so let's start with the time frame. August 14, 2018, Universal Meditech is out at the Fresno North Ponte Industrial Business Park. That's at 1320 East Fortune Avenue. They experienced a fire. So just clarification, small fire. So it wasn't like it burned down the whole building, not at all. There was a small fire. They continued operations there on August 26, 2020. August 31st, our environmental health team is requested for a CUPA inspection that's really looking at the hazardous materials on site. Our inspector goes on site and notes violations and works with this business vendor to submit the right documentation. What we saw on site was ethanol. They had multiple barrels of ethanol on site. Now, just so I can pause there, at this point in time, does a hazardous materials permit include everything? The answer is no. There's only certain thresholds that is legally required to be reported to the state and local agencies. And so that was the main thing that took them over the limit that required them to pull a hazardous materials permit there. That was the ethanol that was on site. So the permit was completed and it was valid from September 1st, 2020 through August 31st, 2021. Inspections are every 3 years from initial inspection unless a complaint is received. So when we issue a permit, we're going to issue the permit with an on-site initial inspection. And then unless we receive a complaint or there's any other documentation that we receive that we need to go back on site prior to the 3 years, then we will go on site. Every year, the business has to complete their permit and also pay their fees so they can get another valid permit for the following year. So I'll go ahead and pause there with this timeline and take any questions from your board.
So again, the 3-year permit for the hazard materials that was issued back in 2020 was only good at that location, correct? It wasn't transferable to any other locations?
Correct. Permits are not transferable.
And then two, just based upon the timeline, there was a fire in 2020, and the fire department identified some issues they were concerned with, and I believe at that time the health department came out and there was a permit issued, but there were some things that you required them to do which they hadn't done, it's my understanding. Hazard mitigation plan, and work with our department. Did they complete all the proper steps so you could issue that permit?
Yeah, they completed the steps to our satisfaction to issue them that permit. And just to let the board know, our environmental health team was there strictly for the hazardous materials. We do not have jurisdiction, nor do we have that expertise to speak into lab operation. That is completely outside of our environmental health team. So as we're discussing 2020, that is not within our scope to look at the lab operation side. We're strictly looking at hazardous materials.
And then again in 2022, some of the photos that you put up on the screen, I assume the city of Fresno reached out to us to come back out to do an inspection with them, correct?
Yes, and that's on the next slide.
All right, then I'll stop there.
Great. Yep, so we fast forward. So a previous slide was 2020. We fast forward now to October 31st, 2022. And right here is where we receive City of Code Enforcement. They reach out to a city fire department regarding the stored chemicals on site. And so with the code enforcement and fire inspector requested environmental health assistance regarding this hazardous waste at the facility. So this is now our department again being engaged at this particular facility. And so as we are re-engaged, we now start wanting to communicate with the business owner here. So November 1st, our staff go out to the site. We're not able to access the facility. The front doors were locked. We knock on the doors, no answer. We called the facility operators, no answer. We left a voice message for the general manager. On November 3rd, we met with City of Fresno Code Enforcement and Property Management, and we were able to do a walkthrough with Universal Metaltech employee. And as we were talking with the employee, they're really deferring any type of hazardous materials conversations to their general manager, and they weren't on site on that particular date. And so we were definitely wanting to speak to their general manager to learn more about those hazardous materials on site. I'll go ahead and pause there before moving on to the next slide. Okay. And so we go into November 8th, no response from the general manager, and our staff again visited the site, but were again not able to access the facility. And if I could pause here just a bit, we don't have the authority to go on to private property with the type of situation that we have here. And you're going to hear that over in some of the narrative here. We need to have the right legal authority to enter private property without consent. So the front doors were closed and locked again, knocked on the door, but nothing there. There was a false alarm notice from Fresno PD at the front door there. So as we move forward, again, staff, we did receive an email from Zhao Wang, the president and CEO of Universal Metaltech, regarding the status of the facility. We responded back to Zhao Yang regarding the hazardous materials on site, and we're really looking at knowing more about what's going on site and seeing whether or not they're compliant with the state regulations. No response back from the operators and CEO, president, and our staff went out to the site again, and we weren't able to access the facility. Front doors were locked, knocked on doors again, no vehicles parked in front, and this is November 23rd, 2022. We contacted property management regarding the status of the business, and the property manager indicated to us that they have a court date with this business, and they're attempting to evict them. Okay, so this is where we last heard of Universal Metaltech in City of Fresno. And now, pretty much now what we think has happened here, and Nicole Zeba's here, she can address any of these other gaps with some of the timeline there. But now, we move over to the city of Reedley here. And just to get you acclimated in the city of Reedley, where the location of this warehouse is right at this area, 850 I Street, Reedley. There's the City Hall right across the way, and Kings Canyon Unified School District, their administrative building is here. There's a gas station right at the corner here. So it's really in their downtown, right in the downtown area there. And as we're going around, here's what we see at the Reedley site. These long lines of refrigerators and freezers. These are freezers along the side here. Down this side is where we had the -80 freezers. Those were a particular concern to us. -80 freezers are really there to really keep certain infectious agents in that type of a state, so they're not infecting other areas when they're actually exposed to the environment. So we were definitely concerned about those negative 80s. But all these materials here, these refrigerators and freezers were full. Here's what we saw. This is one of the freezers there, what we saw in there as well. Some more blood sample tissues, serum. There is just so much material. Here's some more photos of that. Again, what you saw in the city of Fresno, you're seeing those boxes. This is some ethanol here. You're seeing chemicals throughout the site. I wanted to share these photos because look how tightly compacted this is. When we first, and I'll get to this here a little bit later, all we could categorize is what we could see. But as we started moving the boxes with City of Reedley, we're finding more and more as we go through this site here. The refrigerator freezers, as you can see, all this was wrapped up. This was items that we saw at City of Fresno that are now over at the Reedley site. And so now we'll start the timeline with December 19th to December 20th. Our staff is pretty much notified from City of Reedley of the situation out there, and we really think this is the same company from City of Fresno. We're exchanging emails, and our team with City of Reedley contacted the FBI to really evaluate potential public safety risk. We didn't have a lot of information, but what we did know, we needed to make sure that if there was any other jurisdictional authority that needed to be evaluated, the right federal or state agency needed to make that determination before we really took over any type of response. And so that's where the narrative kind of picks up as we start down that pathway there. We're exchanging information with FDA as well. FDA is involved on December 20th in regarding the medical testing kits that are actually on site. And FBI conducted, they brought us all together for a meeting to really start having a conversation. And at this time, on December 21st, FBI said, everybody stand by. Everybody stand by. We need to assess what we have here, and we need to see whether or not it will be a federal investigation or not. So we had to stand by and really assess to see what the outcome of the FBI was at this particular time. So we're having pretty much through January through February board, we're having ongoing communications with the state agencies and the federal agencies. We're really trying to really assess the public risk level, which ultimately there is no imminent risk to the public at this time. As we're going through this process, there is no imminent risk at all to the public at this time. I'll go ahead and pause there and take any questions.
Perfect time to pause. Thanks, Joe. When you say there was no public threat at this time, walk us through who makes that determination.
Yeah. So really working with the FBI and the state agencies, the information we had at this time is that there wasn't any imminent threat. So there wasn't any, we had no indications of biological spewing out in the air. The chemicals weren't spilling all over the floor. There was no indication of any of that at this point in time.
All right. Thank you.
You have a contained site. What we have in the pictures and the photos is everything is pretty much in the refrigerators and freezers. Okay. Moving on into February. So we're coordinating with, and DTSC is the Department of Toxic Substance Control state agency. They indicated to us that the FBI has given the state and local agencies approval to resume civil investigation. This is now where the FBI has given it back to us. It is not within our jurisdiction. It is somebody else's, but it's not ours. So now, as we start going into February, February 9th is a very key point here. Universal Meditech issues a nationwide recall of its COVID-19 test kits. FDA was involved back in December 20th. You already saw action from the federal government against this company. You saw that action take place with that recall. That was the FDA because of our collaboration and gaining information from the business owners, being able to move forward with that recall there as well. On February 24th, we had a multi-agency meeting to really coordinate the investigation of Prestige Biotech. Now we're learning about Prestige Biotech. Who are they? What are they? Who owns them? To this day, we're still trying to understand and find that out. And so there's this indication that Universal Meditech owned the assets. They're in bankruptcy. They send it. They said Prestige Biotech owns this asset. And what we really see that is they were just trying to muddle everything up, so we didn't know who had the financial responsibility that we could really go after and really hold them accountable. So that was, I think, a lot of misdirection by this business representative during this time. Definitely added to its complexities. As we started meeting on February 12th, we needed to talk about what do we wear? What's our personal protective equipment when we go in? What do we need to be testing for? We needed to make sure all of our agencies were on the same pathway and that we all agreed that that was the appropriate personal protective equipment to wear. That's going on February 24th as we're engaging in those conversations. Okay, we'll move into March 3rd. March 3rd, we met with City of Reedley Fire Department, CDPH, DTSC, City of Reedley Police, Fire Code Enforcement, and the building inspector. We did a briefing on the site investigation, and we really started working with the Code Enforcement and Fire really to meet the operators and determine whether or not this facility was safe to conduct an investigation. On March 3rd, a key point here is we were able to utilize state assets to do some air monitoring. We wanted to understand what was going on in this site, and so there was air monitoring done with some collaboration, and it was deemed safe there as well. At this time, City of Reedley issued an unsafe to occupy notice on the front door of the building, and the site is contained. There is no imminent risk to the public. Very important. As we went on this site and we were able to do some air monitoring and some other pieces, we were able to confirm, okay, this site is still contained. Things can change from week to week in this response, and so we always had to have our measures of protection for our community, and so we're always revisiting other types of monitoring as we went through this response. On March 6th, we received that email from City Code Enforcement was granted access by Prestige Biotech, Lynn Warner. This is a representative that has actually been communicating with City of Reedley. Throughout this entire time, they are communicating heavily with City of Reedley, our federal and state partners, and the County of Fresno. They are exchanging information, and we are on weekly meetings with all these agencies, and we're sharing information. This is what they told you. This is what they told us. It was really a great coordination of information because that gave us more knowledge on what the potential plans were in their operation. So I'll go ahead and pause there. Questions? Okay, so we'll move into March 16th. As we move forward, we talked, there was an inspection warrant, and we were able to go in. And so the padlocks on the large walk-in refrigerator and door of the warehouse were open. This helped us to see a little bit more, and we saw a 55-gallon container of ethanol in the warehouse, 6 empty containers of liquid nitrogen. These are all items we started to see once we were able to work with City of Reedley, get that inspection warrant, and be able to walk through there. The live mice were there, and we were going through the warehouse there. Ms. Wang was stated that they were looking for a new location and that their lease ended on May 6th of 2023. They also indicated that the manager for the facility lives in Las Vegas and provided a name there as well. So again, we're obtaining information throughout this entire process. Very much helpful to our state and federal partners. The CDPH Food and Drug Branch staff, they went through and embargoed the unapproved medical test kits and medical supplies. This is the only part of the response that is being led by an outside agency. The medical devices is being led by CDPH Food and Drug Branch, and they're in coordination with FDA. All other aspects of the response is at a local level, City of Reedley level and County of Fresno level. They as we kind of went through this process here, the site DTSC did not take any samples. They did not see hazardous waste generated. So DTSC, our state agency for Department of Toxic Substances, deemed there was no hazardous waste generated here on that particular site. So that actually removes them from the process, and then it really goes through the local level. Throughout this entire response, we're evaluating whose jurisdictional authority are we moving on, but we are not standing still. We are moving, we are responding, we're reacting to meet this public health need here. So, and so when we got through on March 16th, no imminent risk to the public through that time. March 22nd, our FCDPH team and our health officer, our CAO, and a board of supervisor member, we meet on the Reedley lab situation. And we provide a briefing on where we're at and give them, really evaluate where everything's at with the state and federal authorities. Pretty much said the abatement is county's responsibility. That is our responsibility to abate this particular site. FCDPH, we emailed the Prestige president in China requesting complete inventory of all materials on site that pose a public safety risk. A few hours later, two individuals identified as Lynn Warner and Steve Punch showed up at our office requesting assistance with mice care. So we send this email, and then we have these representatives here. And wow, what a response. Great, give us some information. And they had none. They really had nothing for us. It was a lot of hemming and hawing, but no real information. I think this is just the nature of this business representative, where they would try to show compliance at some level, but they don't give you the real information. And I think that's really unfortunate. Most of our businesses in Fresno County don't conduct themselves in this manner. To see this business doing this with our staff is just something that we're just not used to seeing. People that want to comply with the laws, they are forthcoming with information. Unfortunately, they decided not to do that. On March 24th, our staff and Reedley Code Enforcement coordinated with the state vet contractor to provide water and distribute remaining food to lab mice. We still have lab mice in this building at this particular time. And so we're working to make sure these lab mice have food and water, and City of Reedley took the lead on that and working that piece through there. So the mice were inhumanely treated and subsequently humanely euthanized by the City of Reedley's contracted veterinarian on or about April 11th. On April 21st, health officer order is issued. This is our first public notice here. Our first public notice of the health officer order. It's on our main page of our website. It's also put in on the building as well. Our whole purpose for the first order is to identify, inspect, search, identify, and categorize all chemicals, biological specimens, reagents, and other hazardous materials or biological materials. This, we stay closely with our county council, and just superb job by our county council in really laying out the legal framework. We did not have the federal and state agencies' responsibility. This is local ordinance. This is what we were able to do with the authority of the health officer here. So we were able to do that on April 21st. Even through this process, they are still communicating with us. They are still sharing information. And as I move forward in the explanation, even with our second health officer order of abatement and warrant, they were letting us know we're moving to the city of Fresno. We have plans to move to the city of Fresno. So again, really good community. We're still getting some level of communication from them. On April 26th, we needed to contact the Sheriff's Department Explosive Ordnance Division to assess any potential explosion hazard associated with some chemicals found on site. We're discovering things every day as we're out there, as we're going through this inspection, and as we see this, there is no imminent risk to the public. The Sheriff's Department came out, EOD division came out and determined that. Now we go to the multi-agency on-site investigation. And again, I really want to hold up our partners here to be able to bring CDC, CDPH, FDA, and the City of Reedley, all of us on site on May 2nd through May 4th, really was great. We were able to really categorize and go through that process there. On May 31st, we issued our second health officer order publicly. This is our closure and abatement order. Pretty much we wanted to show two things we wanted to accomplish here. We wanted to show proof of ownership and responsible parties to conduct business in California. Very specific. We wanted to know who was behind this business, and we wanted to have that available to us. We also required a plan to transport hazardous materials and infectious agents. This was a key part of the health officer order. They stated they were going to move to the city of Fresno. It was not an assumption. It wasn't a suspicion of the county of Fresno. They stated they were. So we attached the responsibilities of transporting hazardous materials and infectious agents to the health officer order. That proved to be difficult for them to do. It proved difficult for them to do, and they asked for an extension. We gave them 7 days to respond back to us, and they asked it to extend the date. We gave them, I think, 3 or 4 days to extend it. They were given all this information back in April, the requirements. They were given ample time to respond to it. They even denied they had infectious agents via email, and that was simply untrue. We had a CDC report that stated otherwise. They had infectious agents on site. That is why we included all that language in those health officer orders. They did not comply with the health officer order as stated, and so we now needed to bring our other legal tool out. The next legal tool we did is that we filed the Superior Court an abatement warrant to destroy all biologicals. This is where our focus is on the biologicals. We felt City of Reedley had more of the authority to deal with the chemicals and the equipment and those other pieces, but statutorily, we felt the biologicals were in the Fresno County Department of Public Health, County of Fresno's realm there. And the judge of the Superior Court signs the abatement warrant after determining due process was followed, and the abatement or warrant was issued by the Superior Court. This is important here. This is where it wasn't the County of Fresno by itself or the department administration deciding this was something good to do. This was a judge of the Superior Court validating all the research, all the investigation we had done to date was sufficient enough to go and destroy these biologicals. And that was, I think, just a testament to our county council, City of Reedley, our environmental health staff collecting all this information, and our federal and state agencies. That exchange of information we've had for weeks on a weekly basis, we've been doing that early on, has been just instrumental, beneficial for us. And so we go on site, we destroy biologicals. There's 36 refrigerators and freezers that were properly removed, transported for destruction by our licensed contractor. We did this July 5th, 6th, and 7th, all in compliance with the abatement order and the judge's requirements to get it done within 14 days. So as soon as the judge signed that, we had 14 days to get this done. We were able to bring in the right licensed contractor and the right licensure to be able to do this. Not everybody can haul infectious agents and destroy agents. So what does it look like for biological agents? These days, everybody's in full personal protective equipment. We take possession of all that material. It is autoclaved, so that is a high steam process, and then it's taken out for incineration. That was a process that was done with the biologicals. That is a process that when we worked with CDC, we wanted to make sure that was the appropriate protocol to follow, and they confirmed that was the right protocol to follow as well. There was a total of 126 44-gallon containers and one 38-gallon container removed. During the City of Reedley's abatement now, and that's happening right now as you believe, and I think Nicole can give you probably the latest and greatest there, there is still approximately another 10 44-gallon containers of biologicals. So we do this big removal on July 5th through 7th, but there's still more. We're finding stuff. So think of this warehouse. It is packed. It is to the ceiling with boxes and everywhere. And as we're moving things around, we're finding more chemicals. We're finding more biologicals. We're having to deal with more issues as we go through this cleanup here. Any questions or comments?
Question I do have. So as you continue with the cleanup, I assume that you have monitoring taking place. There are people wearing appropriate personal protective equipment. So this isn't happening in a haphazard way, because I assume that the Department of Public Health wants to make sure that the site remains contained. So can you just talk about that a little bit more, just for the public's sake?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is great coordination by City of Reedley. Anytime we mobilize, there's a pre-meeting for safety. We discuss all the protocols with everybody beforehand, but when we go on job site that particular day, there's always a briefing on making sure everybody's got the right PPE, what are we following, and so that's pretty much run up the chain already through the respective agencies. So everybody's protocols are pretty much in alignment, and so we're all adhering to the same level of safety protocols. And so as we go through this destruction, all these protocols were in place, and there was no imminent threat to the public as we went through the destruction of the biologicals.
As I understand it, the FBI early on told us, don't go to the public. We're looking into this. I think also at some point, my understanding, a few months ago, our Department of Public Health, our PIO was in communication and wanted to kind of put something out to the public. And there was like a press release that was sent to, I think, the California Department of Public Health. And they said, no, that press release is not going to work. And so can you just talk a little bit about how the county, the City of Reedley, we wanted to be transparent, but we also did not want to harm the investigation that was taking place?
Yeah, definitely. So as we're communicating with our federal and state agencies, they're making it very clear to us, we cannot speak on this. This is our protocol. This is what they adhere to, in that they're not able to speak on an ongoing investigation. They've made that clear pretty much from day one. Now, we've had conversations with them about what are we going to do. So City of Reedley and County of Fresno, as we started having these conversations, we can't adhere to what the FBI and what they're doing. We needed to have these discussions with our public, and we did that, first of all, with our public noticing requirements. And then when the media started doing the stories on it, we've been doing multiple media interviews and just trying to get the information out as well. But that decision wasn't made in a vacuum. The City of Reedley and County of Fresno, we sat together and said, okay, when is the right timing? What does this look like? And we had public items for record out with the Superior Court. That the biological destruction, there's a lot of information there. With all that information there, it's important for the community to understand exactly what the response was like and making sure that we maintain public health the entire time. Okay, and so now the Reedley site today, there's no imminent threat to the public safety on the Reedley site today. That items are contained, and City of Reedley is going through that abatement process. And as they kind of move through that, like I mentioned earlier, they are finding other chemicals and other biologicals, and we're going to definitely continue to support Reedley in addressing those issues. On-site air monitoring, I mentioned that was done on March 3rd. Water and wastewater testing found no issues, and so City Reedley can kind of speak to that. That was important for them to do to make sure that there wasn't anything in the water system there, and City Reedley can speak to that. Electrical power was maintained to refrigerators and freezers. Why is that so important? This would have become something else if we weren't able to maintain electrical power. The reason why those biologicals, we were able to go in with the PPE level that we did is because we were able to keep them running. If we can keep the -80 solid, that helps our job out significantly. And that is something definitely CDC and all of us appreciated, that the electrical power continued to stay on. Syndromic surveillance from all Fresno County emergency rooms did not show any anomalies. I'd like to explain that a little bit. Syndromic surveillance, today, Fresno County Public Health, we have a window into all the symptoms that people present with at the emergency room. We've had this since, I want to say, mid-2000. What that does, it gives us data to support when there's any anomalies, when anything is ticking out of the ordinary, we're able to see that in the data, and we were able to dive deeper into that data to see what it is. There was no anomalies reported through our syndromic surveillance during this time period. Another piece was, since there was COVID-19 virus on site and there was mention of COVID-19 viruses being injected into mice, we wanted to see whether or not in our surveillance, in our wastewater surveillance and clinical surveillance. So clinical surveillance is when people go out and go for a PCR test. The state of California is able to do variant testing on that. There was no abnormal variants circulating in Fresno County in the city of Reedley during this time period. Those were two very important surveillance measures where we knew there was no risk to the public at this time from this particular site. And so, these risks and these threats, they were mitigated from the infectious agents, chemicals, and unlicensed medical devices on site. But guess what? They're still dangerous, right? We still have chemicals on site. We still have things. If we didn't do our job, this would have become a public health issue. But we addressed it, and we were able to mitigate this through all this 14-agency collaboration there. I just wanted to talk a little bit about it's 3900 North Portela Lane in City of Fresno. When we were made aware of them wanting to move, we reached out to our partners at City of Fresno and gave them a heads up. This is what we're dealing. We are not done with our investigation, but we have a legal pathway that we are going to follow against this business. And so we definitely made them aware of it. And it's in recent notifications, it looks like City of Fresno has stopped that particular site from further in its approval process. And I'm glad, because I think we still need more to learn about this particular business. Next steps. So we are aware of an ongoing investigation with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, California Department of Public Health, particularly their Food and Drug Branch, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. EPA was brought into the fold recently for the chemicals on site, and they're evaluating their authority here in this particular instance here. They're pretty much the newest one to this response. The FBI is providing consultation as needed. And our department cannot comment on criminal investigations by the federal, state, or local enforcement agencies. I respectfully defer that to those agencies. Our department we will continue supporting City of Reedley with removal of the chemicals, equipment, and medical devices, and we'll continue to do our weekly meetings with our partners as well. We've offered assistance to the City of Fresno to collaborate with them on any issues with the proposed site. And I think this is a great opportunity for our federal and state regulations to be evaluated, particularly on the regulation and oversight of privately funded research and development laboratories. It was frustrating going through this response, I got to say, because it just didn't seem there wasn't enough impact, a hook, to really be able to go after this business enterprise. And so as we take a step back and we evaluate this response, how did we do this? What was our legal tools? It was done at a local level. And so there wasn't any type of federal regulation or oversight in place that we could see. And this is really kind of gleaming this from our partners and their frustration as well, and kind of dealing with this particular situation here. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to evaluate that, and we'll definitely continue that conversation with our federal and state partners specifically on what that could be. You know, at this time, there's no evidence of the Reedley lab being connected to a foreign government. That is something that has been said in some media circles, and we have no evidence of that. We have evidence that there's individuals of the business, they definitely live in China, and I think that's why it's important. There needs to be more investigation into this. There needs to be more agencies looking into this, and I really hope that that continues. You know, I think locally, and I really, you know, during this response, we're going to take a step back. We're going to do an after-action report when this response is done. But I think already we're seeing, we're going to evaluate our local county ordinances, and we're going to collaborate with our 15 cities and really evaluating any opportunities for increased collaboration. I think there's something there for us to do. And I'd love to work with county council to really evaluate that there and being able to see what else can come to fruition with that. And as we go through any next steps, we're going to evaluate our resources. We're going to evaluate our fee structure with businesses as it comes to hazard mitigation plans, but also everything else here that we can at the local level to ensure this doesn't happen here. You know, and in closing, and Nicole Ziba will come up and speak as well. Throughout this entire response, Department of Public Health, we maintained and we preserved the public health throughout this entire response. We were able to validate the public wasn't at harm throughout this entire response. And I really want to just really support our team here, Environmental Health, but also all of our 14 agencies and city, really, because they helped us do that. We didn't do this alone. We did this as an entire group. So I'll go ahead and pause there if there's any other questions or comments.
Steve?
Just a quick one. Now, when it came to the North Point Industrial Park deal, the city's code enforcement knew there was problems there back in 2020, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the code enforcement's controlled by the city council. I believe everybody will agree with that. I'm just laying that out there.
Yeah,
They knew before we did.
Yeah, the electrical code violations that we saw that was in City of Fresno, we saw the same type of code, electrical code violations in the City of Reedley.
Right.
Joe, I think you did a great job. When you acknowledge the team effort there at the end, I'm amazed at the amount. Just like a week ago, as the story was really starting to break. I mean, it started breaking a little bit before that, but I had so many questions. So I was one of the ones that requested that we put it on today's agenda. And in that time frame of this last week, you guys have done amazing work pooling all of the information that you had that was out there and creating this timeline for people to take a look at and really understand all of the details that went into this investigation. I know that in some ways we've come under attack. That includes, your department, public health and behavioral health, and all of the different groups that are part of this. But even in light of that attack, you guys have done a great job getting us the raw data, that information, and providing it to us and the public, and creating this timeline and going through that. And I am most happy to hear that no time along the way was the public ever at threat. I think if the public's at threat, then this thing changes pretty dramatically, and the type of response that you would see and the type of, where you would spend your energy and your resources would have changed. But finding out, as you did, that the public was not at threat, that gave you the ability to let the other investigations continue, the more legal, quote, criminal, is there crimes being committed here? Let those investigations continue by law enforcement agencies because there was no public threat, right? So it allows us all to let them do their work without making these grandiose announcements that have been called for by some members of the public.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
As soon as we finish up.
I think I'd like to hear from my colleagues because I've been saying a lot about this issue, so I'll just be quiet.
Joe, I want to thank you and the city of Reedley for the, we oftentimes talk about transparency, and a lot of times the public doesn't understand how transparent you can be and can't be. And so also to come out as soon as it was reported, to be able to give as much information as was possible, certainly to be commended. So I want to thank you for that, and wanted to invite the city manager, Reedley, Ziba, for comments.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board of Supervisors. If you'll allow me, on behalf of the mayor and the council, they sent me with a message to express our gratitude to this county, to all of you, to the county council's office for your assistance in this. We are a small city, 25,000. We could not have done this without you. But let me tell you, I am mighty proud of our little city. This was a bad player company, a bad actor company that was kicked out of Canada. They went to Texas. They got kicked out of Texas. They came to California, recruited with tax credits, by the way. They went to Fresno, kicked out of Fresno, went to Tulare, kicked out of Tulare, went back to Fresno, kicked out of Fresno, came to Reedley. This little David city took down Goliath with a green garden hose. I'm incredibly proud of our city, our code enforcement officer, and I will stand up anytime and say that we did everything in our power to keep the public safe. There has been a comment about, sure, once it was broken, by the way, a phenomenal local paper who is here today broke the story, so got to give Mid-Valley Times credit for that. Once it broke, the comment was, well, now why are you going with all the information when you said you couldn't? And let me tell you, there's a very good reason for that, and that is the conspiracy theories abound on this. I have heard everything. I have watched a local politician on national television talking about communist Chinese labs that are manipulating viruses. We had to be able to come out to the public to say, do not listen to the conspiracy theorists. Do we have a problem? Absolutely. Are they Chinese nationals? Absolutely. Are they manipulating viruses? No evidence of that. We had to be able to come out with as much information as we possibly could, but we ran it by our state and federal partners. Because when the FBI and the CDC and everybody else in the alphabet soup of state and federal agencies tells you we cannot even comment whether we're doing an investigation, you cannot comment. Well, when they tell you that, as a small local agency of 25,000, you're not going to defy the FBI, right? But once this went public, Joe Prado and I, and by the way, he mentioned the word to me, dogfight, once. I would not want him to do this without Joe Prado. You all have a gem. Hold on to him. He's incredible, utter professional, great logic. So I just have to put that out there because I now have made a lifelong friend. We sat down with our federal and state partners. We are still meeting with them at least twice a week, if not more frequently, via emails, et cetera, to talk about what information is going to the public, what information is out there, what conspiracy theory do we have to debunk, what myth do we have to debunk. There are a lot of them. There's a local myth in Reedley. There's a supermarket that's shut down across the street. There's a local myth that it shut down because mice got out and infected the supermarket. No. The roof is collapsing in the supermarket, and it shut a year prior to this lab coming to Reedley. So it really behooves us to get out in front of the media now to debunk these myths because the conspiracy theorists are having a field day with it. I do want to explain to you where we are right now, though, because I think it's important. We have right now, actually, just before I walked up here, making sure we still had staff on site. Today is the very last day of the abatement of the fixtures, the freezers, the refrigerators, some of the medical machinery. So as you saw from Mr. Prado's presentation, one of the first things was an inspection warrant. We then went back with a warrant to, unfortunately, humanely euthanize the mice. We then went back with a health officer order to inspect the freezers, find out what we had in those negative 80s that were very concerning to us. We then went back with abatement of what was in those negative 80s and all of the biologicals. We then had to go back, so you're getting the pattern here, right? Every time we go into this building, because it is private property, we have to have evidence to show a judge that we need to get back into this building and do something with it. All of that is processed, unlike what you see on TV, where it looks like a warrant goes to a judge and it's signed within the hour and you get to go. That is not how it works for inspection warrants, abatement warrants, and private property. It takes time. So we are on a process where now we are abating the furniture, the fixtures, the medical equipment, et cetera. Joe mentioned that right now we're still uncovering biologicals. I want to be clear with you. We are not uncovering infectious diseases and all of that. What we're uncovering, if you don't mind me stating, is taking a desk, opening a drawer, because we are not allowed to destroy documents. So we have to go through everything that we're going to take out of that building. We're opening desk drawers and finding jars of urine and peed on pregnancy tests. That's considered a biological. And if in your head you're going, gross, disgusting, how hygienic was this lab? I'm with you on that. And that's where I turn to one of the statements that Mr. Prado made in his presentation. We have got to get this fixed at the federal and state level. Board, I know you want to do something about this locally. My council wants to do something about this locally. We are not going to fix this at the local level. This is a problem. These are loopholes with privately funded, fully privately funded labs, even legal labs. Now, the one we're talking about in Reedley is bad actors. Bad lab. They did not want us to know they were here. That's why they moved in under the cover of night. That's why they never came to the city for a business permit. They did not want us to know they were there. There's bad actors. But even legal labs, if they are privately funded, something like this could be in every city in the nation, and we wouldn't be able to regulate it the way we should be able to regulate it. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be buying products where I know there are peed on pregnancy tests in the desk drawers, right? We have a problem. And instead of pulling people together and stating, hey, public, we need to have our federal legislators fix this. Let's get together and demand that they fix this. We have some local folks who are taking it amongst themselves to make us focus in the past. Why didn't you talk to the public about this? That's a red herring issue. Red herring issue. We need to fix this. We need to look in the future, because I don't know about you, but I don't want another one of these in Reedley. So I appreciate every single one of you that has stood up. You've called our local legislators. I know that because our local legislators have told me. I mentioned to Joe last night, it's a little unnerving. At 10 p.m., the phone rings in the house. You pick up the phone in the kitchen, and it's a congressman wanting to talk to you about what have we found today. They're interested in this. They're paying attention. Let's do it right, Central Valley. Let's do it Fresno's way, and let's get this done. I think we have an opportunity to really fix a national problem that we have. So that being said, down that rabbit hole and back up, right now is the last day of the abatement for the fridges and the freezers. We still have more process to go. The US EPA will come in short order, although they have a tangle of regulations they have to follow before they can step onto private property and destroy private property. They will come in a matter of weeks and remove lab chemicals. These are chemicals that are commonly found in legal labs. Nothing unusual has been found. After that, we then turn it over to the FDA and FDB, the Food and Drug Branch. Those entities will come in, and what we will have remaining in that warehouse are probably 500,000 pregnancy tests and COVID test kits, some of which are unauthorized for sure. We don't know about the other ones. So altogether, my estimation is that, my hope is that by the time we enter heavily into fall, this will be another empty warehouse in Reedley like we thought it was for the last decade. Do you have any questions for me, sir?
Well, Nicole, I would just segue onto that. As a member of the board, I appreciate everything that you did on behalf of your city and the county. And as a small city, I don't think you have a playbook for this kind of thing.
I missed illicit Chinese lab 101 in city manager school. Yeah.
We as a county, we're a little bit more prepared for these kind of things, but I don't think there's a playbook for a small city. And as a member of the board, I want to say commend you for everything you did, because it's always easy to look back and throw rocks, but when you're dealing with it minute by minute, it's a lot harder to deal with. And I want to compliment you on everything you did on behalf of your city and the county.
Thank you,
And
sir.
I want to set the record straight a little bit on this, because as you said, there's been a lot of red herrings, a lot of accusations, and we need to be clear on that. Me personally, I first became aware of this issue on Thursday, July 27, 2023. And that's when my chief of staff mentioned the article to me that was done by your local newspaper. 3 days later, and I'm surprised Supervisor Mendez is being politically correct today. Well, I'm going to take a page out of his playbook, and I'm not. So I'm going to say Councilman Bredefield, let's call him out. He held the press conference on Monday, July 31st, making a lot of accusations against this board and members of the community that were simply inaccurate. Inaccurate. But again, he has a history of self-promotion over the facts, and that's what this was all about. And it's tough being a member and trying to do your job the right way and have that. So, and at that time, he stated members of the Board of Supervisors knew about this facility 4 months. That's inaccurate. Simply stated, I knew about it 3 days before his press conference, and I know other colleagues here to my left and right, they knew about it days ahead, just like I did. So some members of this board knew, but not everybody. Nor had we ever discussed this as a board in a committee or any way, shape, or form, and as a board is in our entirety. Today's the first time it will be discussed by us as a board. And Supervisor Magsig, I want to compliment you for going on the radio last week, Thursday or Friday, and setting the record straight. And you did a fantastic job. And for me, the take-home message on that, which I received a lot of calls on your comments, is all protocols were followed, and we did it by the book. And we had state and federal agencies with us, along working with the city, and we worked together as a team to solve this issue. And you clearly highlighted that, and you did fantastic. And Reedley wasn't a lab. Reedley was a storage facility. The lab was in Fresno and had been there for 2 years, for 2 years of code violations that 2 years hadn't been done, where the little city of Reedley took steps in days.
Yes.
Days of being noticed by the garden hose, in days took action and got it resolved, that the great city of Fresno took 2 years and still couldn't resolve the problem. So again, I compliment you on that, and that needs to be done. So the city of Reedley, the Department of Public Health, and Supervisor Mendez did their jobs. And that's the bottom line. The timeline that we all viewed today clearly shows that steps were taken to remedy this situation. But that's the difference between us at the county and members, I'll say members of the city council that just want self-promotion instead of rolling their sleeves up and doing the work. We get things done. We don't hold weekly press conferences to promote ourselves. That's the big difference between the county and the city of Fresno. And in addition, we stay in our lanes. During the Creek Fire, we didn't go up and see what Supervisor Magsig's doing up there and doing that. Now, he readily invited us, and we went. But we stay in our lanes here, and that's how we get along as a body, and we get things done because we know our place. And during the floods, Supervisor Mendez and I, we protected our communities from floods, and we worked together to solve those issues. I don't need a member of the inner city to come tell me how to protect my farm community. I don't. And that doesn't occur on this board because, again, we work together and we know our place here. So with that, it seems to me that the responsible person would have got the facts before holding a press conference with inaccurate information to scare the public and for more self-promotion. You got to love when it's an election year and these kind of things happen, you know? So I believe some members of this board are owed an apology for the inaccurate information, and I want to tell them my office number is 600-1000 if you want to call me, or if you want to write to me, Hall of Records, room 301, 2281 Tulare Street, Fresno, California, 93721, if you want to send it to me written. But that's what we deserve for the showcase, as Supervisor Mendez says, the circus that goes on. And again, as I started, I'll end. I'll compliment you for what you did. There is no playbook. You rose to the occasion. And as a member of the board, I'm extremely proud of what you, your city, and your mayor have accomplished to eradicate these bad actors, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Brandow? No comments?
I just want to compliment City Manager Ziva. If we've got 15 cities, 13 of them are small cities, and you are the best city manager.
Thank you, sir.
Because I've worked with you for over 9 years. You were there before. You're a steady hand. And I just think you did a fantastic job. You always stayed the course. You did the right things from day one. And I just really think you've been a great city manager.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir. And yeah, it's been a tough one. Mr. Pacheco, Supervisor Pacheco, if I could address one thing, I think you brought up an interesting point, and that is that you didn't learn until this process, until only days before a press conference by a council member. That was purposeful.
Yep.
Mr. Mendez, I called Mr. Mendez directly because we were struggling getting state and federal. They have to walk over this tangle of regulation and protocol to speak to locals. And it was a call to Mr. Mendez and a call to Magzig, only because he's my supervisor in the district I live in, to say, can you help us somehow? They were not even aware of all of the facts of the case because very astutely, they know that there are things we were not able to share, and they didn't press. And so I just want to say, I know this put all of you in an uncomfortable position, put Paul in an uncomfortable position of not having all the facts, maybe having some, not others. And I just think, wow, there is wisdom in that our board has shown that they didn't have to have their hand in everything as we, somewhat experts, were dealing with this. And so I want to thank you for that and acknowledge that you just spoke the truth. You were unaware, and I can absolutely speak to that.
Yeah, and I, again, had all the confidence in the world. Supervisor Mendez was in his district. He would be able to handle it, and he did. So, but again, that's the difference of us staying in our lanes, complete confidence in each of my colleagues. They're able to do their job, and they did it.
Yes.
So I have no issue with what the county did, what Department of Public Health did. Again, we followed the protocols, as Supervisor Magzig clearly stated, and did it by the book. So as a member of this board, I have no issue with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to compliment the Department of Health. I mean, you guys from day one have done a magnificent job, and it was a tough job. A lot of other agencies you had to work with. But I just want to say something, that Brian was talking about. That this whole deal with the councilman reminded me of Joe McCarthy in the 50s, who just launched accusations, had hearings in the Senate. They were some of the first TV hearings in the Senate, and 9 times out of 10 it was all false. And he ruined a lot of people's lives. But this is the same tactics. These are dangerous tactics. These are tactics that, people need to get together and say, hey, that's not right, you're wrong.
And Nicole, if it, you want to?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes.
Nicole, I also heard you interview. I was out of town when you were on KMJ the other day, but I did get a chance to listen to that podcast. You did a great job. You did a great job today. All of the information, Joe and Nicole, and all of the people who've garnished information to present have done a wonderful job. And yet I don't believe it will deter for 1 minute those who are politically motivated and the sycophants that follow them to try to tear down and destroy elements of our community in their own political efforts. So I think that's what we're really up against. So I appreciate the data. Unfortunately, a few moments ago you talked about conspiracy theorists. They are not going to be deterred by all the data that was presented today. But I do appreciate it. Thank you.
And Nicole, if it's okay if I can call you Nicole?
Yes, sir.
We go back a few years. I had dark hair when we worked together back in the day. And I'm not surprised with the reaction and the response that you took in trying to move as quickly as possible to get a solution, and really appreciate making the calls you did to my colleagues to get involved and just focus with whatever sideline issues came up, but just to try and solve the problem. And so I really want to commend you on that, because as you've stated, and Joe made a great presentation, it's just, we got a problem, let's get it solved, and then move on forward to make sure, or try to make sure, that this doesn't happen again in our community. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank the county as well as and my colleagues for getting involved right away, rolling up the sleeves and getting to work. But thank you for taking that initiative to move forward with it.
Thank you, sir.
So with that, board and public, this is just a presentation. No motion is required, and we'll move on. And thank you all. Clerk?